In India, solar power is having its moment in the sun. Solar installations alone accounted for 40% of renewable energy capacity last year. And one company that's making news in this regard is Luminous Power Technologies. Known for their expertise in battery and inverter solutions, they've recently forayed into N2N Solar Ecosystem. To know more about the project and the future of solar power in India, today we have with us Preeti Bajaj, MD and CEO of Luminous Power Technologies. Hi Preeti, welcome to ET Insights.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Preeti, solar power clearly is driving the clean energy agenda in India. How do you think government schemes like Surya Ghar, they add to the impact of the overall trajectory of renewable energy sector, and how is Luminous contributing to this momentum?
I think it's a great question, right? Like solar energy is at that commercial viability point where it is a very, very cost-effective source of power. So I think it's an imperative that government is incentivizing and making sure that every citizen in the country has access to this cost-effective power. So to that effect, it's creating momentum, it's creating velocity in the industry. It's also preparing itself for a net zero Bharat that we keep talking about. We can't get there simply by putting large solar farms. It's really this small to medium size, I suppose, customer adoption that is actually going to change the trajectory per se. The schemes help because they help the viability. For long, there has been a challenge in terms of every average Indian being able to support themselves to get access to solar power. Two things are actually happening. The cost of technology is coming down. And then, of course, the schemes such as the Surya Ghar Yojana is a great add-on to help people get to that payback even faster. When it comes to Luminous, we've been on a journey for solar now for a while, is what I would say. Even when the technology was very nascent and I guess quite expensive. And being a technology company, you've got to do that. You've got to be staying ahead of the curve so that you can bring the right solution set. Second thing I would say is that we are very focused on the consumer in the home and the small and I suppose medium setup of commercial and industrial frameworks. So when it comes to rooftop, we've been preparing ourselves. What we understand is that it's really, really critical that a good solution is sized up for your kind of load. And the ease of installation, the ease of finding a solar installation partner is delivered to the customer. It's not the solution that we are putting forward as a solar power generating system is number one, completely made in India. So we are now, I think, the only company that makes solar panels, makes solar inverters, and makes solar batteries. And so essentially we make for India, in India, a solar power generating system. We do that across three categories. So we recognize that there are a lot of parts of India where there is no great access to power itself. So there is an off-grid solar system. We also recognize there are the metropolitan cities which are adopting to grid tied. And the Prime Minister often talks about, you can make your own power and you can sell your surplus power. मैं चाहता हूँ कि हर व्यक्ति जो है सोलर पावर ले और उसके बाद अपना घर फ्री में चलाए और उसी के साथ साथ वो उस आकृत बिजली को ग्रिड में डाल के पैसा भी कमाए. So we have those solutions as well. And then finally, the hybrid inverter, which is really about making sure that you can do both the functions. You can actually sell your electricity, but if you think about the future, where the third point, and I heard Mr. Modi talking on CNBC just a few days ago, the third point he said was that as these two-wheelers, which are electrically operated, and four-wheelers come around, he expects that people will be able to cost-effectively charge those two-wheelers at home using solar power as well. Now, to do that cost effectively, you may even want to consider putting your surplus energy into your battery. So that's what a hybrid inverter allows you to do as well. You can make the choice. So it's flexible to the life and to the lifestyle you choose to live and the choices you choose to make.
Preeti, you recently launched N2N Solar Ecosystem. How do you think the larger renewable energy sector can tap into a full component manufacturer to rapidly deploy solar solutions?
I guess it's really, really important that for us, whatever we do with a focus on quality and customer. So, step one for us was that we should be able to ensure that a quality product is being manufactured and kitted together in India so that we know what's going in. To give you a simple example, look, solar is a high engagement category. If you, I don't know if you have solar at home or not, but if you're considering it, one of the things suddenly what happens is you're heightened about your electricity bill. You realize, oh, I spend 8,000 rupees a quarter or 8,000 rupees every 2 months. And when you get solar, you really want to know that are you saving money, because it's like having a little power plant at your disposal. So what we've done is we've said, well, we've gone upstream. What that simply means is कि हमने सारे systems connected बनाए. And we give you an app and you can see what your savings are real time. How much have you produced? How much have you sold? How much can you store if you're on a hybrid inverter? And what does that mean in terms of return on investment? So when we think about ecosystem, we think about the end goal of the customer. So that's really, really important. The second piece is the ecosystem is the journey a customer takes. So from the time I think about solar, then suddenly, I'm thinking, oh, I'm confused. So you don't know where to go. You're hearing all this noise, you don't know where to go. So there, I think Luminous Power Technologies plays a big role in terms of our brand. It's a consumer brand. On top of it, it's a consumer home brand. As I sit here, 80 million homes plus have an inverter battery solution. So we hope that trust engages them to engage with us. When they come to us, we want to look after them. So what we've done is we've said, well, look, if you're thinking about solar, give us your bill. And all I need is the latitude and longitude of your house. And I will dial in sitting in Gurgaon or wherever I am and size up the system for you, give you a report that gives you your system design, give you your payback, give you what the production will look like, and put expectations in front of you of what the warranty could look like as well. And I think that's about reducing anxiety. That's the job of a good ecosystem, is to reduce anxiety and make it easy and frictionless for the customer to move through it. And then, of course, there is a physical part to, well, how do I go about it? And then it's about bringing the right installer. Have you recently called an installer to your house? No. Electrician को बुलाना होता है तो कितनी anxiety होती है. Everybody is thinking कि किसको बुलाऊं. Mostly people have like long-standing relationships, and they come down the track. So now with this sort of I guess ecosystem being developed, solar installers that are easily available or partnered or accredited by Luminous down the track as we create them. We have 7 solar academies. So we are training people in solar as well. It's not just good enough to say, let's go solar. It's a system I'm putting in. So we also have to create the ecosystem of educated installers or good quality installers, which do exist, but build more of them so that they can service the customer.
You spoke about accessibility. Apart from innovation, what is important is also inclusive adoption. How do you think the industry itself and your organization can make it possible, can look at it?
Inclusive adoption. Tell me more about what are you thinking about when it comes to inclusive adoption?
It is so that it finally reaches to the last person.
To the last person, yeah, okay. So, well, couple of things I think are at play, right? When you think about the C&I segment, the commercial and industrial segment, there is certainly on the top end of the commercial and industrial segment, there is a fair bit of investor pressure to say, well, you should use renewable power to offset your carbon emissions. I think every good company today is sitting here and saying, how do I become a good corporate citizen? That is a absolute poignant point, and that pressure is building. And I would say that purpose is building more importantly. Many good industry leaders are already by themselves adopting solar to power their factories, for example. We've also seen that as the awareness is rising, and the job is to make the awareness rise. And as the awareness is rising, we are seeing that adoption come in the middle segment as well. So a small rice mill, a sugarcane factory, medical diagnostics facilities, educational facilities are absolutely adopting to that. And then it's about building, like I said, a good system integration and delivery framework, which is pan-India, so that every last mile of that customer can be A, can get the system, B, can get the subsidy, and C, can have a reliable system installer with a reliable kit available, putting on those equipment onto that rooftop, whichever it happens to be. And I think when you think about, I guess, tier 2, tier 3 India, there we are seeing a wonderful phenomenon, I mean, which the government incentive scheme is really driving, is this serious adoption. You know, people are starting from a 1 kilowatt system already. And if the scheme is as powerful as we expect it to be, 1 crore households will have to be delivered, which means this ecosystem approach will become very critical. So I keep repeating, at the end of the day, somebody has to turn up, put those panels on, and put the inverter in the house, and that person has to be super trusted for you, for me, for every other last mile customer that we are talking about here in India.
Preeti, India's solar capacity, it is projected to grow fourfold by 2030.
Yeah.
That's a huge target. So how do you think the country itself, what strategy, what innovative ways that we can bring about to also fulfill our COP26 commitments?
Whenever I think about the world and wherever I've seen like great adoption of solar or momentum in solar, at least in hindsight or on reflection, what I see is that a government incentive program is always at the center of it. Second is policies that favor standards. Because, you know, we've got to make sure that in our rush of putting solar, we don't compromise quality. In our rush of putting inverters, we don't trade away the make in India piece, I guess. So I think having standards, having qualities, take quality defined in the solar game is critical. And those standards have to be, in my opinion, essentially by segment. So what is acceptable? What is a good quality standard of a solar inverter? It should be BIS certified. It should have minimum X amount of warranty. It must be connected so that it can be serviced. It can give visibility to customer. It could be Energy Star rated as well. We have to think about, you know, what's the quality signal, because this is equipment that's going to power your home for a long time to come. So those standards, industry has an obligation to work, I suppose, very actively with the government policymakers to make those standards. I think we've also got to think about, alongside, what is the energy roadmap of the country looking like? Frankly, my view is that, you know, the passion with which we have built roads, and I guess that's making a big contribution to India's economy. The same kind of velocity on solar and attention is required, because energy will make the next era of the economy. We know that an investor from a foreign country expects that there is a standard of renewable energy participation by India. We also know that we pay a huge import bill on coal. So I think we can actually say, well, we're putting in solar so that the country can actually invest. That's the other way of looking at it, in the things like more roads and more ports, as opposed to just buying coal. So when you think about it holistically, it's really important that we are thinking about the energy transition that's actually happening in the country. And if you look at it, wherever solar adoption happens, and if you look at the other sort of effect that's happening, which is EVs are increasing, then batteries come into play as well. So we've got to make a roadmap of what this momentum leads to. And it may be that the next is a battery rollout, or it may be that it's a standardization of hybrid inverters in the country. I think we've got to build a vision, just like we would build a vision of how many roadways we would connect as Infra India. Energy rooftop solar policy should contemplate what we are going to connect in the home for the Indian consumer.
Preeti, despite all these opportunities that are coming up and the building momentum, there's also the challenges that come along with it. Solar waste, grid efficiency. There are now, increasing causes of concern. What are some of the other challenges that you foresee for the sector, and how do you plan to navigate those?
Look, we're going to build a plane while we're flying it, I think, in this sector. Solar vast has been around at this kind of pace. So far, we haven't seen it. So that means, there is a pending capacity that has to come up to service the demand. There has to be an opening of maybe market participation for customers who are of a relevant size so that they can trade that capacity down the track. There has to be provision for perhaps greater open access. To keep the grid stable, we have to maybe think about grid storage, large-scale grid storage, or we have to think about load curtailment in the home. I mean, these are all items that we have to think about. I guess my point is this: the decentralization of energy is here. So the job is to figure out the solutions, learn well from countries who may have done it first, and adapt what makes sense for India fast. What's not going to happen is we are on the journey of electrification and energization and EVs, if you ask me. The Indian consumer is expecting to be richer than they are today. They are expecting to have more appliances in the home. They are expecting to have more surplus income, and they are expecting to live a more effective, cost-effective, decarbonized life. So the choice is in these challenges is to really accept the challenge and then start building the roadmap. What I will say, what is heartening is a lot of technology work is happening. I think the biggest thing is the shift in our mindsets from we're doing this for today to we are doing this for actually for the next 10 years. Whether that's the industrial ecosystem, because that requires all of us to think like technology companies. And we might all say, well, let's raise the standard of what we are producing so that we can give a quality that is a cost over time rather than today cheap. Shift that mentality, invest more in R&D. As the government incentivizes PLIs, when that manufacturing knowledge comes in, get better at making as much downstream equipment as we can so that we can genuinely take advantage of Make in India. Those challenges exist, but so do the opportunities. I guess I don't have a one-shot answer for you. For what I can say is there's a lot of work to do in this sector for the next 10 years.
Preeti, you are one of the few women leaders in the energy sector. How do you think that the industry as a whole can do to make it more gender inclusive, to have women in leadership positions and fix the leaky pipeline also? Because I think we have enough women joining STEM education, but when it comes to STEM workforce, the number reduces.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the age-old problem. I think what all the industry leaders in the energy sphere can do, and it's a call to action. First, I would say many of them are trying to do a lot of things, but first, I guess, commitment is a conviction at the leadership level that we'll go for some specific targets of how we want to include women. Why I say that is because I don't think there is a dearth of great quality engineers or great business leaders now when it comes to, say, talking about women in that sector. So it's really a question of saying, you know what, I'm going to take a very specific targeted approach to achieve this. Not because it's just a great social imperative, it's also a very good economic imperative. I mean, if we increase the participation of women in decision making at the table, the quality of decisions may be interestingly debated, and we can all save ourselves from a level of confirmation bias, perhaps. That being said, I guess it requires our commitment and openness to do it. If we feel like that the talent is there, which I believe is there, if we feel like that, you know, we as an organization want to stand for inclusion, and Luminous does, we want to encourage, irrespective of, I mean, we're talking about gender here, but really any other attribute as well, we stand for it. So you then have to be specific about at least the organization you create. And many industry leaders are making steps towards that. When it comes to the leaky pipeline, look, we often talk about it. I guess this is a two-way street. One is better policies, which are required to help women coming back to work after, say, having a baby, creating flexibility. Those are options which are well and truly available at Luminous. It would be great if the industry adapts them generally. And I think some companies are trying to do that as well, or are doing that already. But on the other hand, I think it's also a choice that the candidate in question makes. You know, what's your choice you're making? Because that life transition, that balance requires you to have a conversation at home as well, that I want to go back to work. I have some flexibility, but I need support. And I think that kind of is summed up in the line I'm about to use, Anika. I often say India doesn't have a talent problem. We just have a mindset problem, perhaps. So I think if we adjust our mindset, and if more support is garnered around what's required, and women lean in to ask for that support. I would say many women don't ask for it, but there is a bright future ahead. This is a fast growing industry. This is an industry of the future. Women have to be pointed about wanting to be included in it. Otherwise, you'll miss out the next 10 years. I mean, today, if there are two sectors one is talking about, one is renewables, the other is artificial intelligence. We've got to make sure that this time we don't miss the boat. So that onus is on us. But on the other hand, the onus is on the industry to make sure that the work environment or the policies itself fit themselves towards, or at least enable women to make those choices. That work is getting done. We can do more. CII is doing some great work on it. MNRE is trying to do some great work on it, I think, but the action ultimately comes down to the individual. And if all the individuals choose to lean in, it will also create momentum that the industry will move faster. When it comes to, I'll just dissect it and say, when it comes to leadership, I think we just can make some choices.
But when it comes to renewable energy, there's clearly more women representation compared to the traditional energy sector.
Yes, that's true. That is true. I guess renewables far ahead anyway, so that's a good start. I've met some amazing business leaders who are running companies or even doing technology work. I guess because it's maybe a younger sector. So since younger, not by age, it's a younger sector in terms of where it is in terms of industry maturity in the country. And so perhaps it's meeting, I would say the mindset is meeting the momentum, and therefore ultimately the inclusion objective as well. That's an instinct at the moment. Secondly, I think generally it's a big purpose. And I'll just say that I get the feeling that, for example, a lot of women may not be attracted to manufacturing, but they're really attracted to the renewable purpose. So perhaps that is a draw card that the traditional industry or the traditional supply chain of electricity or energy has not had. So that's the only thing I can say. We shouldn't stop at where we are. The world we want to create is 50-50, right? So even renewables has a long way to go.
You recently ran this very successful campaign of Women in Energy, where you challenged gender stereotypes. What are some of the other strategies do you think that can be employed by organizations to overcome such challenges and make the workforce more diverse?
Nothing sells like a good story, Anika. So I think that's why we used storytelling in that ad as well. And I think it makes things real, because we need to include, but the second piece which I really stand for is allyship. One is sharing that, look, hey, we can think about this differently. The other is allyship. We've got to build stronger camaraderie with the men. We've got to be allies for each other. So this conversation has to be more with actually the men in the industry, and how do they think this can actually come up? Because ultimately, it's a teamwork. It's not without them, it's including them. So we have to be very pointed about having, I believe, joined up conversations within the organization. Then we'll come up with something more constructive. They'll have good ideas, and in those conversations, I think they'll also have the opportunity to understand more about what are the challenges here, which perhaps are not being experienced by me by virtue of whatever the societal framework would be. So that's a critical one. And we do these things, for example, we do skits where we play out certain scenarios and simulations to make it a bit more real. But ultimately, there is nothing that will beat, you having a conversation with your mate about, like, how do you feel about this? How do you think about this? It is actually ground force change. And people say, what can one person do? But if every woman had an ally, that pretty much should cover 800 million people in India.
Thank you, Preeti. Thank you so much for being in conversation with DT Insights.
Thank you.